أعوذ بالله العلي العظيم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. Let's see who's here. Admit all. There's only two people. Very creepy. Jeff, Hussein, Riaz. All right. All right, people, here we. Closed Zoom user. Okay, here we are. Going to do Avicenna's Living Son of the Watchful or Living Son of the Wake today. But I said I wouldn't read it. We would talk about it. So I made a summary of it. If you haven't read it, it's probably worth your while to have a quick skim of it. So the floor is open. Anybody wants to talk about this very important allegorical treatise of Avicenna, Ibn Sina? This is your time to say whatever you want. So just jump in. Don't wait for anybody. Go for it. Hassan?
Okay. So, I here noted some of the thoughts of Henry Corbin in his commentary. One of them is about astrology and what he's saying that Ibn Sina in his critiques about astrology, it is not about, it is how to say, fraud science, which do not have basis, but that the people of his time, they went so much in the particulars of it, completely disregarding its foundation, that it became a caricature. It is something similar, for example.
Even today, you could say that the science of astrology, popular science of astrology today, is basically has almost identical features. Yeah.
Because the main purpose of it is the wayfaring of a spiritual traveler. Exactly the same as, for example, with the group of Islamic theologian white sorcery. That's
Yes.
the purpose is we to travel on the road, not
Yeah.
to put the divine forces in
Yeah.
our service.
Behind all of this, I mean, Corbin does a good job to basically unpack it. Some of his asides I don't completely agree with. Corbin didn't really know the occult tradition all that well. He knew the theosophical tradition perfectly, but he wasn't that steeped in the Rouhani theurgical tradition itself. But even still, his point is correct that Avicenna's critique about astrology is based on that. One of the reasons to break it down is because astrology, all of these sciences, the occult sciences, when you put it into the hands of the masses who are not part of a suluk, or at least a conscious one, it always becomes a vehicle to cultivate the nafs and its situation in the world, not to escape it or refine it or cultivate it. Right. So, I mean, a perfect example is all the wealthy, the rich and famous who consult astrologists, clairvoyants, whatnot. They're usually not on any kind of a spiritual path, right? Mostly they go to clairvoyants or astrologers, and that's sort of crowd, but simply because of their social position or financial position or political position. It's not about transcending the world. It's about being more enmeshed in the world. So the criticism is spot on. Whereas with this allegorical treatise of Hayy ibn Yaqzan, this whole discourse is about the process of philosophical purification, or even spiritual purification through philosophy. So all of these various symbolism that Avicenna is employing in here is basically a program you know, of mental or intellectual ascesis, and to identify the various elements of the mind in this process, to the encounter or to the understanding of the nature of the necessary being, God. And he's using allegorical and elaborate language to kind of, you know, um, flesh this all out. Same as what Suhrawardi did. I mean, there's so much identical um, thrusts between what Avicenna is saying here, what Suhrawardi is saying in his visionary, recitals. I mean, this whole from the very beginning, the sage and the active intellect being equated is exactly what we saw in all the previous visionary narratives of Suhrawardi.
And one more point was that in the popular astrology, they treat the stars and the planets almost like the mechanical forces,
Yeah.
completely forgetting that they are animate souls with their own will and behavior.
And who are at least in Suhrawardi's system ultimately guided, or actually are theurgies of a force higher than themselves. They're actual guiding spirit, like the sun, with Suhrawardi, who is called the body is called Huraksh, but the spirit behind it, the theurge behind it, its own god is Shahrivar, the archangel, Zoroastrian archangel of the sun.
Uh, Another point uh, that again, he was speaking about the way the Persian commentator of it,
Mm.
which there is a translation of him,
Yes,
is
yes.
treating the treatise. That he saying symbol instead, consequently of completing the transmutation begun by the will, that symbolic perception already constitute will seek to reduce symbolic perception to the level of the ordinary mode of perception.
Mm.
But basically, instead using this visionary recital to open for us the door to go up to the higher dimension of the noetic, he's doing exactly the opposite. He's putting down to the trivial level of mundane things. He's also talking in the same way about the logic, that the science of logic, if we take it seriously, should the same way open the door for us to see the different, let's say, axioms and premises and so on of logic to go to the higher level of the alamul mithal, the imaginal world. Not the opposite process to downgrade and denigrate its terminology and principle to our mundane level. And this is the same thing which I see in the people who practice mathematics,
Mm.
but they are far away from any spiritual, how say, feeling. That instead of the mathematics open the doors to the higher spiritual levels, it becomes exactly the opposite. They start to treat numbers and mathematical rules and the other things as if they are material objects.
Yeah, they do. And with during the 20th century, this process was completely exacerbated with the birth of analytical philosophy, with figures like Frege, Wittgenstein, and Bertrand Russell, who birthed this entire system that made a conscious break from the entire classical organon of logic. So they just birthed a completely new system of logic. And when you look at analytic philosophy and a system of symbolic logic, it's very much a system of linguistic sophistry. So they're taking even mathematics as a sort of game, right? They've had their detractors, but whatnot. But they believe that their system has transcended all of this, and so ontology is not necessary for logic, which to me is a complete fallacy because logic seeks to basically dissect the reality of things as they are, and how we frame the things as they are, to look at the contradictions if they exist and look at the non-contradictions where they exist, right? This is what the aim of logic is. Then we can criticize Aristotle. That's not a problem. Because I think his system of logic has serious limitations. But nevertheless, one thing that the Aristotelian organon grounds itself in is ontology, is in being. Analytic philosophy does not seek to do that, but it then doesn't explain what do we even mean by the concept of being, whether they're coming at it from the symbolic logical angle or from the mathematical angle. They're not explaining any of this stuff. They don't want to deal with it. And this is how then, in Germany, someone like Martin Heidegger can proclaim the death of metaphysics. In the same way that Nietzsche proclaims the death of God, Heidegger can come and talk about the death of metaphysics. But it begs the question is because just because Western philosophy fell and can only look at the realities of things from a horizontal becoming, that then it imputes an unreality to some degree, right? That doesn't mean that a verticality is absent. That's an assumption that modern philosophy has made. It can't prove its assumption. It's just an assumption. We won't talk about metaphysics. And this begins with Kant, who basically made that sharp distinction that we can only talk about phenomena, we can never talk about noumena. Never mind that he was a Lutheran minister. But we see then later on that even someone like Hegel is having a problem with this approach of Kant, and also some of the romanticists, that preceded him himself. And even someone like Karl Marx, who is the acme of materialist Western philosophy, seems to have a real problem with this approach of taking the unfoldment of material reality as a sort of a language game. He has a problem with that. Although some of his successors in modern postmodern philosophy and deconstruction and whatnot seem to not have a problem with that. So this is where we are. None of these systems, and especially where logic is concerned, wants to answer the question of being. It seems that as if Western philosophy is incessantly trying to run away from answering that question. And when someone like Heidegger attempts to answer the question, in my opinion, he trips over himself. Because what he does with being is that he turns being into a horizontal worldliness, right? So what our tradition knows as mojud, right? The phenomena of the mojud, the phenomena of the existent, is turned by someone like Heidegger into the reality of wujud, which is just completely backwards. So this is where we're at when we're talking about this stuff. But yeah, the two systems of logic, whatever limitations to the Aristotelian organon, in my opinion, is still far more superior a system to talk about these sorts of issues than what modern analytic philosophy offers.
Here I'm would add that even the Islamic mutakallimun, they didn't surpass the level of organon of
No,
Aristotle at all.
no, they didn't. I mean, they had problems. Some of them would attempt to maybe even modify it. And once they tried that, then they would enter into the stream of the philosopher proper. But ultimately, they didn't tinker with it even when they criticized it. I mean, Al-Ghazali has serious rants about the organon, in his Tahafat al-Falasifa, but he doesn't surpass us. He doesn't offer us anything better. And I'm not sure that even if he had a problem, even if given his problem with Aristotle and the Peripatetic tradition as a whole, I'm not sure if the modern analytic philosophy and symbolic logic system was put before him, he would have any kind of other reaction. He would just look at this in terror about what these people are saying.
And last comment, when Ibn Sina speaks about the source of life, the fountain of water of life, that it is the same way as Suhrawardi describes it, but here seems that Ibn Sina is giving a little more details. That paradoxically, for me, the water of life, it is in darkness. That the water of life, it is, how to say, to put it, the center of our own ignorance. That we to get to this water of life, we first should realize, how to say it, how superficial are the knowledge we have, and that we do not anything about reality, and to uh, deep dive indeed in reality, to become open for all the phenomena around us, to experience of the divine, disregarding habits and dogmas, and only then we will be able to find this water of life and to progress further.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Something I wrote recently is blessed is the one that ceases from comparing doctrines and allows doctrine to liquefy. In some sense, this is what Avicenna is kind of trying to say here. If you make these ideas a language game, which is what theologians always end up doing, and to some degree even philosophers, you miss the forest for the trees. This is the beauty of someone like Ibn Arabi, is that Ibn Arabi can take all of these doctrines and just mold them to the argument, even contradictory doctrines. He will bend them as he sees fit, prune them. It's like I don't know what you call it, but this is what he does. And so why I think Ibn Arabi is so important is because he's showing us that reality is malleable to everything. If it can be thought, reality has already articulated it. Doesn't mean it is the full picture of reality, but it means that it is a facet of reality articulating itself. So these narrow-minded systems, whether we're talking about a very straight-jacketed approach to the Aristotelian organon or the contemporary analytic philosophy and symbolic logic, are both you can frame them both as those kind of limitations. They're articulations of reality, but not complete, right? So what a traveler, and this is what Ibn Sina very interestingly, very subtly suggests in this treatise, is that what the true seeker, what the true philosophical itinerant needs to do is they need to be completely open. They both need to understand these ideas, and they need to understand these ideas deeply, but at the same time be completely open, not become dogmatists in these ideas. Let them go. If there are contradictions, see them, transcend them, go to the next one.
This is one of the thing which I love most of Sheikh Muhyiddin, that he instead of straight rejecting other ideas as complete nonsense, as you're saying, he is molding it and put it on the right place to make the whole picture.
That's what I'm
And
saying. I mean, all these various detractors of Ibn Arabi, in whether we're talking about from the Shiite side or the Sunni side, they very seldom actually enter the terrain of engaging with Arabi's ideas themselves. And once they do, they actually fall into a trap. And that trap is that they end up articulating the same ideas in some fashion. I'm going to give you, maybe in about a couple of days, a classic example of this is Al-Ahsai. There's a short treatise by him on the ma'lumat, the ilm Allah wa ma'lumat, the knowledge of God of the things known. It's only a few pages. I found it in the second volume of Jawami al-Kalim. And you will see with your own eyes, when I've translated it, but once you see it, you will see that Al-Ahsai is literally verbatim articulating the same idea as the Ayan Thabita of Ibn Arabi. He's just changing the terminology. That's it. And just, pedagogically and linguistically trying to keep the transcendence of God intact. But in the end, he ends up in exactly the same place as Ibn Arabi. So this is the thing with Ibn Arabi, those who try to refute him and try to refute him on the basis of reading him and engaging with him end up being converted to his point of view, whatever else they say. So this is why this is important. This is a methodology I think that anybody who is serious about whether a genuine intellectual journey or a genuine spiritual journey is a method that people should take serious, whatever else they think about Ibn Arabi and his ideas. But if you are serious, you need to come look at the kind of perspective that he has. He knew his ideas and he knew them better than even a lot of his detractors, right? He understood their limitations. He understood, and then entered it and just completely changed, bent, refined, modified, and whatnot, and appropriated, assimilated it to himself. That's what a Gnostic does. Qurban has something to say about that in this very book, without naming Ibn Arabi. He says that a true Gnostic has to have the ability to comfortably reside in any spiritual universe. And not just the spiritual universes of Islam, but we're talking about across spiritual universes. Muslim to Hindu, Hindu to shamanic, to Taoist, etc., etc., etc. Because these are just cultural expressions of what people have understood about the nature of, life, the real, all of these things. But once you can dialogue between all of these properly, then you see the limitations of language. Then you see that what Heidegger says about language being the as of being is nonsense. It's actually the other way around. Being is what houses language, and language is the iterations of being in its multiplicity. And once you can, you can function from that level, then, you can begin to understand the universality of being itself, which in our times is beginning to be once again deemed as a very dangerous idea, but by secular nationalists and political revanchists and that sort of stuff. Yeah.
And just as a last note, that with this visionary recitals, uh, they put Ibn Sina in a completely different perspective. That the critiques against him, that he is only logician or only philosopher, he does not know anything about the spiritual universe and so on. This completely shows they're just empty claims.
Oh
That
yeah, they are
he
empty
is
claim.
both
Yeah,
grounded in.
yeah, yeah. He's empty claim. You don't have to go very far to learn that about Ibn Sina. You don't even have to know about his recitals or his book, the Hikmat al-Mashriqiyah. all you have to do is if you go into the section of epistemology in the book in Al Shifa, this book of healing, you begin to quickly note that some of the propositions and some of the argumentation have been seen as extremely mystical, almost Sufi. So, you know, insisting on a hyper rationalism for Avicenna itself is nonsense. You know, once you read Avicenna, you begin to see that he had that edge to him. He had that mystical, and how could he not? You know, someone who spent a lifetime basically poring over every conceivable item of knowledge known at his time cannot but rupture into that terrain. Because once you realize the limitations of knowledge, you know, in terms of the corpus of knowledge, you cannot but then push your own mind beyond it. And that's where you end up. You end up in a mystical domain. And as far as we're aware, um, you know, Avicenna knew about the Sufis. He hung out with Sufis. Um, well, who was it? Abu Hassan. There's a story about him and Abu Hassan Kharagani, although it's probably questionable whether they actually ever really physically met in person. Where Kharagani is noted to have said, you know, he knows what I see, and I see what he knows. That's the difference between that Sufi master and Avicenna. So, yeah, and then when you read, you know, something like the Recital Hayy ibn Yaqzan, then you begin to see that actually, you know, this guy had a lot of genuine esoteric depth to him, despite the, you know, rationalist and, you know, very dry scholastic writing.
Thank you very much, CD.
Sure. Anyone else? Hussein?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Um, I had just a couple of questions, just reading through it again. Um, I mean, I've read this a few times over the years. I love it, and along
Me
with the
too.
commentary and everything.
Yeah, me too.
Um, but this is the first time that I was looking at it from the standpoint of, you know, maybe what he's is, you know, is what he's describing here a journey through his own soul, or is it through the macrocosm? Because that's just been on my mind more so, and I've always read it, I think, as a microcosmic
Yeah, go ahead.
journey, but I can easily see it as being a macrocosmic one
Sure.
because he, you know, at every level it's just describing things as if like that's just what is out there,
Hmm.
and also describing it in the plural, like the 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 troops of the irascible faculties and the concupiscible and the imagination. There's all these different kinds of beings in the imagination that seem to signify like different imaginations, be different
Yeah.
people's faculties. And then the angels, right? There's each of us only has two of the terrestrial angels, but it's described as, you know, like the order of those angels and the order of these angels. So the way it reads, it's just like it just throws you into um, the Orient, which is the forms,
Yeah.
and it reads as if it's just an objective world of forms.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I never read it that way, but it seems like you can read it that way
Sure. I mean,
as
but
well
just
as.
just remember that the microcosmic journey is occurring in the macrocosm, right? So this is something that is assumed, even with Suhrawardi's own visionary tales, um, where these macrocosmic items that appear in the narrative are then the symbols to their higher realities. They are the theurgies of the theurge itself, the angel, the form, whatever, the archetype. whatever you want to call them.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. You're doing both at once, um, going through the outer and the inner. Um, the structure of it is very interesting. I think I remember Corban saying somewhere that if you try to map this out, you can't. Like it's impossible to map this because it really is a weird kind of twisting, spiraling kind of thing. The one point, if I can find it, that really stands out is it almost seems like after you go through the orient of the sublunary, you still have to you're still in a way contained within the heavenly spheres. Like
Mhm.
there's the matter of the sky is still encompassing you, even though you've already journeyed through the orient of the earth. That's the point where I realized, oh, it's not simply like we're just going to the orient, but there's a gradual kind of integration or digestion of the material
Yeah.
on the way towards the formal.
And that's why
Um,
there is progress and regress and then progress again and regress again, right? Throughout most stages of it. So it's not a linear, you cannot expect, a wafer can never expect to have incessant illumination. Just like my own sheikh says, don't, be addicted to bast alone. Don't be addicted to expansion alone. So there is always this going on, this spiral, this up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. But the more you progress, the more you realize that this is part of the process that you're going to experience. It's a given. And so because of this, you really can't map it out. Because
mm,
there's such a huge level of subjectivity involved to this journey, that how can you map it out? Because there's so many invariables and unknowns during this process.
mm, yeah, makes sense. Um, so that was one of the thoughts I had. The other was I was looking at it from the standpoint of what we're going to read next, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more then. But just anticipating, um, I never understood the whole. Ibn Sina doesn't go. He doesn't go all the way, and
Yeah,
Suhrawardi is completing what Ibn Sina started. One reason is because the recital of the birds is is actually Ibn Sina's recital.
there's a lot of dispute about this now that it may actually be by Suhrawardi himself, or at least the
Oh,
recensions, but whether in the Arabic and the Persian that are come down to us may not have been authored by Avicenna, but may have been the versions of Suhrawardi. This is now a
oh,
big debate about this. There's a big question mark on that recital of the bird.
okay.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, Avicenna is taken to the door, to the gate of the bridal chamber, right? And then invited in, but he stops. He doesn't go any further. So he goes all the way in and comes back again at the end of the tale of the Occidental exile. So this is the major difference. And for example, he says that as we'll see next week, he says that these symbols of the great overwhelming are absent in the Hayy ibn Yaqzan, but they're alluded to in his, Salman and Afsal, very vaguely at that by Avicenna, which he's talking about Fana, right? So, but with Suhrawardi, he spends the first half up to the point just as when the hudhud, the bird arrives with the message, unraveling the symbol of what the great overwhelming actually is, how it works. The descent into the lowest state of the soul, you know, um, and then its upward thrust at the lowest nadir. In darkness, and it's then pulled up. So these are, and it shows you this in slow motion. How this works. The descent and then the reascent, and then once you get there, You make the journey, stripping up all these things. Then once you get there, you're, because you're still embodied, you're compelled to return again. Those are the elements that Suhrawardi kind of one by one underscores and writes about that even Sinas is missing. Either he assumes that you already know this, or but with Suhrawardi, these are the central key symbolisms that need unpacking that Avicenna didn't do.
Okay, I see. Well, then it would seem that what recitals by Suhrawardi are, it's just that one that he thinks is picking up where Ibn Sina left off, because the other recitals, as far as I can remember, they are all very similar to this one, where it's
Yes.
this khutbah that he's receiving, but there isn't really a journey. So it's that recital of Occidental Exile where he takes that leap. And then I suppose the recital of the birds too. Did Suhrawardi say anything about that?
About
The recital of the birds? Because he mentions Salaman and Absal
yeah.
and this one, but he doesn't. Does he mention anything about
This is why I'm saying, this is why some people who've looked at this are saying that this was probably authored by Suhrawardi himself. It's also possible that there was a version of the Recital of the Tayr, the Recital of the Birds, attributed to Avicenna, that then in the final version that we got, where it was augmented by Suhrawardi, because that symbol does exist in it. The transformation of the bird, its escape out of his cage. These are all those symbols, right? But Suhrawardi tells us in Tale of the Occidental Exile they're missing in Avicenna, but yet they're present in the Recital of the Bird. So, this version of the Recital of the Bird, who is it really by? And there is one core consensus among some people that it was most probably authored by Suhrawardi himself. Yeah.
That would make a lot more sense, yeah, because it wasn't until I read Herman Landhold's review of Thaxton's translation where he mentions, he's like, it's just a transcription of Ibn Sina's, and I went back and I looked at it. It's just word for word, it's the same one. But yeah, it would make a lot more sense then if it's authored by Suhrawardi. Okay, thank you.
No worries. No worries at all. Jeff, Riaz, Mary, who else wants to talk?
Yeah, sure. I'll chat if that's okay with
No worries.
everyone.
Go for it. That's why we're here.
So I found this a bit hard to digest, I confess. It's very dense and it's, looping towards different things and there's a lot of things going on. One thing that really stood out to me though, and maybe this is a very basic question, but the Orient is kind of presented as a very barren place, as a vast desert. It's not without things, but it's a very
Or at least one layer of it. One layer of it. Initial layer of it, yeah.
right, and then it progressively gets more and more live until you get these very nauseating entities, and then these entities sort of transform, I guess, into terrestrial angels that are also daemons. That's what he's called, and then he ends up saying that these are just jinn. So it seems like, I don't know. It's like when I think about it, it's just like, is your like do they have all of these natures? Are they all three of these things? Is it dependent upon the soul as it perceives them? I was just thinking about what the multifaceted nature of these things are. Are they all three of these things, or just?
It's okay. At the beginning of the Orient, right? Because we're entering the realm of perfection and perfectibility, so everything is in there. But at its lowest level, it is barren. Okay, and then the more one climbs, right, the more it becomes alive, and as it becomes alive, you have at the middle and lower rungs of it, these beings that are not fully perfected. So they have both darkness and light simultaneously, they're mixed. And then the higher one moves through that realm, the more one comes to pure luminosity and pure perfection that doesn't contain all these hybrid kind of elements. So the beings are no longer just, hybrids of demons and angels. They start to become fully angelic until, that itself ruptures into the divine proper. If you take that as our world, right? Most human beings, the society of people that we live amongst, right, are like that. Where much of the world is spiritually barren, right? But as one starts to, uncover more and more layers to the barrenness of the world, one comes across these hybrids. Now look at our times right now. You look into the various popular spiritual cultures, you're constantly getting these demon angel hybrids, whether amongst the teachers or whether amongst their followers. And so a true seeker needs to keep going, not just stop amongst one of these way stations or one of these groups or get sucked into one cult or another. They need to keep going because the truth is more, luminous than that. It doesn't mean that there isn't a group that doesn't contain the pure nur, but that means that for a salik, they have to keep their journey is to God. Their journey is not to a group. Okay, so once you even transcend this, then these admixtures of the mercurial nature of various groups, people, etc., that itself begins to liquefy as you get more and more into the pure element of things, whether it be embodied within a group or not. That's irrelevant. That's secondary.
Okay, so in light of that last thing that you said regarding about the identity of the group, there seems to be this sort of sharing nature of the active intellect itself as you're going through this. So at the end it says, "Were it not that in conversing with thee I approach that king, by the very fact that I incite thy awakening, I should have to perform duties toward him that would take me from thee. Now if thou wilt, follow me, come with me toward him."
Yeah.
Peace. And obviously there's the idea that the active intellect is meant to guide us, but now I'm wondering, is there any other what could the active intellect do if it was not guiding us?
But yeah, I mean, the active intellect is constantly guiding, but those who actually listen or see its form are very few. But one thing that it says that is extremely important is that its calling to God is part of its job, right? It's drawing you to the haqiqah, it's drawing you to the reality, is part of its service to the real, to the al-haq, right? So by calling the Avicenna figure in that story to it and guiding it and showing it in cities and talking about these various climes and its, in its various beings and populations, is actually doing this on behalf of God. This is part of its task.
And is it possible that in the active intellect showing you things, that all of the things that you see are really just kind of want to say like scary entities almost? Because when I was reading this, I was sort of thinking, especially in the prelude sort of says like, okay, he basically did this when he was basically like imprisoned and he had nothing. He basically went on like this inward journey in his mind, and it sort of brought to mind what Jung is doing in his Red Book, where he's constantly talking with the active intellect. But the things that the active intellect shows him are just like really kind of scary things, right?
Yeah,
like all of the images.
Perfect example. The Red Book and this treatise of the living son of the Watchful are very much like that. And the Suhrawardi Recital is exactly what Yublis is doing in that book. Precisely.
Right, and I guess one thing that fascinates me about the Red Book is that Jung will go into all of these like crazy imaginings, and you're reading them and you're kind of like freaked out, just like, is this guy okay? And then you'll come out with these like psychological nuggets. And these nuggets are very profound, but at the same time, they're just psychological. They're very much in the microcosm.
Yeah.
I guess it talks a lot about the orientations of these two people. right?
Yeah. You read these kind of very weird things by Jung as well in his second book on alchemy, his Mysterium Connectionis, the mystery of the conjunction. There's sections of that book that even get pornographic and very disturbing, but he uses all of that in a completely alchemical sense. Much of it has to do with some of his patients. Without naming them, he takes the contents of their psychosis as these archetypal projections of the shadows and then resolves them in the book through the alchemical symbolism. So yeah, Jung is very good at that. He does that.
But one thing that I would say about Jung is that because his goal is individuation,
Yeah.
it does not seem as if there's much of an impetus towards the transcendent, because it
That
is
is the
about
criticism almost a lot of that's textbook criticism that has been leveled at Jung. The question is, was Jung merely writing this way? Because we're just remembering, he's writing for a professional, even though he has his followers, he's also writing for a professional cadre of academic psychologists of his time, knowing full well that he was a student of Freud's, who are not interested in spirituality. They're interested in psychology, or by Jung's time, this separation has been made. But Jung, to me, seems to be interested in spirituality and really pushing envelopes in his psychological work. So he's not going to appease everybody. But if you understand that perhaps that he himself was doing a form of taqiyya in order to get his works out there to a core group of colleagues and specialists, then you leave it as that, because some of the stuff he writes about in some of his books, the Red Book being a notable case of it, he has kind of ruptured beyond an acceptable academic boundary, at least in the rationalist mentality of the Europe of the time. He's walked right on the other side of it. So Jung, even today, in Western academic psychology, is still a kind of, he's not considered a fringe figure, he's considered a major figure, but they treat him with kid gloves over this stuff. They don't like this esoteric Gnostic kind of stuff that Jung, and so they further psychologize Jung, even though with his Red Book, he himself is kind of not psychologizing in several places. He's looking at these experiences as real, paranormal, if you like, experiences or projections of the shadow or the collective unconscious.
right. Yeah, it would seem that Hassan talked a bit about mathematics. I guess in that sense, he's more of an intuitionist or a realist about the mathematical objects that he was working with. Okay, cool. This elucidates a lot for me. I'll take another read at this. Hopefully, it'll coalesce a bit more materially. Thank
You
you.
got to be patient with it. It is a wonderful visionary recital. I mean, I have gone back to it many, many, many times over the years. It has its limitations, but it has its real perks as well. Because ultimately with this, you can read it as the microcosm macrocosm thing being one and the same thing. So it really doesn't matter anymore once you read the narrative, what is happening and what. So that you can take the symbol in both ways simultaneously. Real instantiations of archetypes in the world, animate, and then principles that are higher simultaneously, so that as you're following the story, both of these things are kind of gleaned. So it becomes a very three-dimensional kind of thing.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. I mean, one thing it does is it very much three-dimensionalizes Ibn Sina himself
Yeah,
to me.
big time. Yeah.
And I guess one last thing that I'm kind of curious about. Would you agree that like the Persian and the Arabic resonate very differently? Because the people who write the preface to this, they say that this text is a rare exception among texts that are written in Persian, in the sense that the Farsi actually clarifies things rather than to sort of drown you in like aphorisms and stuff.
I uploaded a edition of the Arabic text. This was done in the late 19th century. Corban didn't like that text. This is why he did his own critical edition of it. The problem is I have never been able to find a copy of Corban's text of the Persian. It was, I guess, you get Avicenna and the Vision and Recital. I mean, this is very common. Now you can find it in multiple PDFs. But the edition of the Persian and Arabic text that Corban did for the Bibliothèque Iranienne series is almost absent. There's specialist libraries that have it. I tried to get it one time at UCLA and even put in an interlibrary loan. Back then it was interlibrary loan system. And some library, as it was about to come in, stopped it and sent the book back. So I'd never actually seen the second volume of Avicenna and the Vision and Recital that has these original texts. There's a copy here at the National Library of Australia. They're willing to reproduce it for you, but they want to charge you like about 17 cents a page or more. It was about $2 a page sometimes to make a photocopy or a PDF of this stuff. So you're gonna run into the hundreds of dollars to get a copy. But it is the Persian treatise, Corban, also, at least if you read the notes to that commentary, the commentator in several places Corban claims misreads the Arabic and imputes concepts into it that are close, but are imputations nevertheless. My question is, I'd have to read this treatise in the Persian, which I haven't, because I haven't been able to access it, but if I'd have to read it to see whether the intention of the author matches the Arabic. Because you have this also in a convention of Persian where when a given treatise is translated into Persian, they're not going to translate it verbatim. Persian is a very polyvalent language, so the translator is going to read an approximation into the Arabic. So this is most probably what's going on, but I'd have to look at it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
That was really, really good. I really enjoyed that. As far as I know, that's the first time I've ever read any Avicenna, and I found it very good. I just went back to look at, while you guys were talking there, I was having a quick look at the introduction to the Suhrawardi book that we're reading, just to see what Suhrawardi's problem with Avicenna is, because I seem to recall that in the introduction it was mentioned that, I mean, he really liked Avicenna, but he kind of one-upped him, I think, or tried to one-up him, and which I think is your point. And when we get to the tale of the Occidental exile, is his attempt at
Here's what he says.
one-upmanship.
We're gonna read this again next week. But he says in the second paragraph, when I saw the tale of Hayy ibn Yaqzan, the living son of the Watchful, I was struck by the fact that although it contained marvels of spiritual words and profound allusions, it was devoid of intimations to indicate that the greatest stage, which is the great calamity, Tom at that Kubra, that is stored away in divine books, deposited in the philosopher's symbols, and hidden in the tale of Salman and Afsal, put together by the author of Hayy ibn Yaqzan. That is the mystery upon which the stages of the adherence to Sufism and apocalypse are based. It was alluded to in Hayy ibn Yaqzan only at the end of the book, where it is said sometimes certain solitaries among men emigrated towards it.
Okay, thank you.
So what he's talking about is the stages of the path, and also particularly Fenno is what he's talking about, this annihilation,
Right.
this complete ego unraveling.
And you're saying that, not to jump ahead, but Suhrawardi goes further, and he dives
You
right
don't
into
find
that
this in here.
aspect.
I mean,
Yeah.
here Avicenna, or the figure, the character, meets the active intellect, and active intellect takes him on a kind of a, shows him around, but
Yeah.
and they approach the palace, even the gates, but there is no Fana. There's no entry into that realm.
Okay. All right. And you did mention another treatise. Hussein was wondering, I think, if there was anything else, another treatise that Suhrawardi took exception to, and you mentioned it there, Salaman and Absal,
Absolutely.
which
Yeah.
I don't know anything about, but I just
It's
thought I'd
here.
mention there's.
It's here, and it's in this book. It's in the
Is
PDF.
it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Might have to give that a read too, just for fun. I kind of got lost. Now this is kind of trivial. Getting back to this treatise here, I kind of got lost in section 16, and trying to figure out that whole topography there and the cities, and trying to figure out their city's number 10 here, their city's number 8, their city's number 9, and trying to get my head around all that, which is, I admit, is probably a pretty trivial matter. But I just wanted to say,
Here's what I wrote. I summarized 14 and 16. The realms beyond the west are Occident. Beyond the western sea lies a desolate, chaotic land populated by peoples of varying moral and psychic constitution. Some devoted to strife and violence, others lovers of justice, wisdom, and temperance, still others inclined to evil or abstraction. These 12 nations or stations represent degrees of the human psyche, from base materialism to contemplative illumination. Beyond them dwell angels and pure spirits to whom only the purified may ascend. The Western or Occidental kingdoms and their 12 cities delineate the psychic anthropology of humanity. Each city is a configuration of the soul's virtues or vices. Wrathful tribes, just nations, contemplative hermits. Their salt deserts and wars signified the desiccation of a consciousness severed from the source. Yet even here, luminous peoples exist, souls adorned with justice and compassion who act as Awliya al-Nur within the darkness, the saints of the light. Avicenna thus maps a moral topography where every psychic type corresponds to a region of being. Corban calls this spiritual ethnography, an imaginal geography of the self.
right. I didn't read your entire summary, but I did read that section, and yeah, that was very well worded. So that kind of answers it. And I mean, it doesn't spell out, what he means by the 10 and the 9 and the 8 and the 5, but that's beside the point, I think, anyway. But thank you. Yeah, no, that's a great summary. I have to finish reading that. Also, I really liked in section 21 the mention of the guardians and the noble scribes.
Mm-hmm.
And like when he talks about writing, the noble scribe whose job it is to write, I'm assuming he doesn't necessarily mean literally, like in terms of like a literal form of writing with pen to paper. Like he's talking in a more metaphorical sense, I assume.
Yeah. This is actually a Quranic trope. The Karam al-Katibi, it's a very, very well-known Quranic trope of the angels, basically jotting down all the actions of people throughout their life, etc.
Right.
So Avicenna is
Right.
using this, is using this. What did I write? Together they inscribe and dictate the destinies of being, echoing the Quranic noble scribes. So what does he say? Those who resist demonic seduction are guided by the terrestrial angels. Meteor is between body and spirit. Passing beyond them, the soul enters the climes of the celestial angels, divided into two cores of knowledge and of action. The right-hand angels dictate the archetypal forms. The left-hand angels realize them in existence. This corresponds to the polarity of pen and tablet, intellect and soul. Thus, Avicenna's angelology becomes a metaphysics of articulation. All being is divine speech, graded by luminous intensity.
Nice. Nice. Awesome. All right. So, I mean, there's obviously several levels of meaning there, from the most sublime all the way down to the manifest. And, yeah, the manifestation of ordinary action and behavior in the world. So, yeah, that's great. Yeah, I really like that. And, okay, well, that's pretty much all I have to say, other than just to express my admiration for Avicenna in this particular case. That was wonderful, I thought.
This is
And
a great book. What Corban has done here, first of all, I think this reading this book itself is a requirement to understand Suhrawardi. Corban has been criticized, but I think the criticisms are off in several cases. I think this is an excellent book because it does show that Avicenna's cosmology, that usually is dealt in a very dry kind of rationalist way, does have that very esoteric mystical edge that then is just exploded by Suhrawardi. And the way that Corban explains this is phenomenally good throughout this book. And then that after that first section of his description and his analytical treatment of this is when we get these recitals that then culminate with Hayy Yaqzan and then its commentary, its Persian commentary, which is the last 100 pages.
okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? No? That's
So Henry Corbin, he says that Ibn Sina, towards the end of his life, he started his own project of Hikmatul Ishraq, let's say. But this project was either or finished or it was lost, the copies of the book to us. And I'm wondering if we had access to it, what image of Ibn Sina would be presented before us?
Well, he has a treatise. We're not sure when he wrote it. It's assumed that this was one of the later treatises towards the end of his life, called the Hikmat al-Mashriqiyya. At least this is the kind of the ad hoc title that's been put on this treatise, but it's not illuminationism in the way that we understand with Suhrawardi. It is a philosophical treatise. It departs slightly from the over-rationalism of his other stuff, but it is not quite where Suhrawardi is there yet. There are allusions in it that one can look as a kind of a proto Hikmat al-Ishraq in some respects, but it's not that yet. So, I think that Corban is right, that Avicenna, would have at some point in his life, especially towards the latter part of his life, gone beyond certain things. Okay? And also, let's look at Avicenna's own family pedigree. Avicenna is noted to have come from an Ismaili family. So he had this Shia Ismaili family background. And you can't come from a family like that without having at least those Neoplatonic esoteric inclinations. It's impossible. So he went through his entire adult life as kind of first as a reconstructor of Al-Farabi's Aristotle, then bloomed into his own man, and took the system beyond Al-Farabi and even the Ikhwan al-Safa. But you see throughout Avicenna's Kitab al-Shifa, Isharat, Al-Najat, his main three books, that he has that same kind of esoteric edge that you espy in the Ikhwan al-Safa and then even some of the Sufis. So, and then someone who has gone through such massive ups and downs as Avicenna did, this respected scholar thrown into prison once the dynasty changed, and never mind someone who experienced everything. He lived as both a glutton and then also as an ascetic. So he had the best of both worlds. It's accepted that he wrote his magnum opus, the Book of Healing, while being drunk. that they would bring constantly pitcher after pitcher after pitcher of wine, and that he couldn't work otherwise. He had to drink cup after cup, and he had to be totally off his face to be able to write. This tells you something about the man, right? That he couldn't function on this high sublimity of thought without being, completely off his face, and then his muse would come out and he would write and write and write. And this stuff was taken against him by the Fuqaha, and especially by Al-Ghazali, that plays on it quite a fair bit. This man was a drunkard, and but even how do you explain the hyper rationalism of a drunkard in the form of Avicenna? So, but what this tells you is that the man was seeking transcendence. That even his writing was a modality of seeking transcendence, and that he was drinking as heavily as he was to be able to concentrate and write tells you a lot about his psychology. That you cannot take Avicenna on face value at all. He was a genuine seeker, and he was using the rationalism both as a veil as well as a vehicle to that seeking. And in this, we see it crystal clear. So I don't care what people like Dimitri Gutas and some of the more recent contemporary interpreters of Avicenna say about Avicenna, when they lambast against Courbet. I mean, Gutas to me I take him as a takfiri. I mean, Avicenna.
Thank you very much, Lady.
Sure thing.
I do have one more question,
Sure,
actually.
go for it. Yeah.
I've never seen this word before. Just trying to get it back on my page here. Well, I obviously have seen the word jinn a million times, but I've never seen the word hin.
This is an invention of Avicenna's. He's trying to distinguish separate, species of these subtle beings. You often come across this it's a Persianism, because in the Persian mythical lore, the Paris, right, which are the jinn in the Arabic lore, come in different species. So like even in the Western occult tradition, you have the elementals that are basically these beings associated with the four elements. In the Persian world, you have a very similar thing going on. So in this, what Avicenna does, he talks about the jinn and the hin. He's trying to kind of communicate that distinction between different species of these subtle beings.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, if that's all she wrote for this, at least we have a preparation now to now delve into the Tale of the Occidental Exile with the benefit of having read Hayy ibn Yaqzan. So once we come to our session on that next week, we're that much more informed about this treatise than we otherwise would be. There are two versions to this. There's the Arabic and the Persian. The Persian is a bit longer. So in Thaxton, the Persian version of the Tale of the Occidental Exile is running, what is it, from page 112 to 122. So that's 10 pages, whereas in the Arabic, it's only 3 pages long. So we will read this Persian version next week. So let's see, Thaxton's got it divided by 45 paragraphs. With the exordium and the introduction, you can make that 46 or even 48 paragraphs. So divide that by 2. If we do this over a 2-week period, we will get a lot out of it, because the symbolism of this is extremely deep, even deeper than what Avicenna, we just read in Avicenna. So we will be talking about a lot of these various elements of this quite a lot. So we'll do this in 2, and then that will be the end of the philosophical allegories. And then after we finish this, we'll read some of these liturgies of Suhrawardi. If we want, we can even go through all of them one by one that I translated. that you have. And then after we finish that, we will then go straight into the Hikmet al itself with the benefit of all of this. And then reading the rationalism through the prism of the allegories, which I think is the proper way to read Suhrawardi, rather than just the strict, rationalist philosophical exposition. So tomorrow we will have our Ibn Arabi class. We will be reading, obviously, the chapter of Adam, the first one, and I will be reading that chapter. So until tomorrow, everybody be well. If you're coming tomorrow, we'll see you tomorrow. If not, next week, Yaha.